the joys of camp, where a child can really run free, far, far from home, in the summer camp capital of Bridgeton, Maine. But when tragedy strikes Camptown, USA, summers will never be the same again. Summer can't come soon enough for school teacher Dwayne Demerit and his beloved kitty, Max. But even this magical season can turn cold, and a late-night phone call can chill even the hardiest Mainer to the bone.
It was about 1 a.m. My wife and I were sound asleep, and the phone rang. It was Mrs. Austin, my next-door neighbor. She said someone was pounding on her door.
The Demerit's elderly neighbor is too frightened to open her door, so Dwayne races to investigate.
I got my flashlight, and as quick as I could, I ran up my driveway and across the street to Mrs. Austin's house. And when I had gotten there, there was no one there.
The late-night visitor, 12-year-old Sarah Perry, is long gone. She dashes down the street to find another neighbor to help her call 911.
So your mom is in the house right now?
Uh-huh.
And you say that she's bleeding?
All over the place. She wasn't moving.
Okay, all right. What's your mother's name?
Crystal Perry.
Lifelong Bridgeton resident Bernie King catches the call from dispatch and races to the scene. It's a night he won't soon forget.
When I arrived, the house was really quiet. I didn't know what to expect. The doorknob and the door casing didn't look like it had been damaged in any way. It indicated to me that there was not any forced entry. So I proceeded to the side door.
And that's where Officer King finds his first ominous clues.
Coming up, I observed blood drops on the step, on the door casing, and on the glass of the inside door.
But his most shocking discovery is yet to come.
I shone my flashlight inside, and I could see Crystal Perry laying on her back, covered with blood.
Police and paramedics immediately enter the home. They find Crystal in a grave state with multiple stab wounds.
There appeared to be lacerations on her face and on her chest. Once it was verified that there were no vital signs, we confirmed that it was a homicide.
The unthinkable has become reality. Murder has come to Bridgeton.
This was very shocking for me. I had never been witness to such a horrific crime in my career.
Investigators work through the night, cataloging the huge volume of forensic evidence. The next morning, residents awake to the news of Bridgeton's first murder in 30 years.
You think it always happens in the city, but here we are out in the country, and it happens right in our own backyard.
With a horde of happy campers arriving in a matter of days, owners of nearby Camp Winona have reason to be afraid.
What makes it such a tragedy is that the 12-year-old daughter was there at the house.
And that's going to affect her for life, I'm afraid.
The loss of Crystal Perry is especially hard on the Perry family.
She was just kind of a bubbly person. She was very friendly to everybody. She was the type of person that would do anything for you if she could. Nobody that I know could do such a thing.
But someone did. While Bridgeton mourns, Police Chief Robert Bell knows this will be the hardest case he's ever investigated.
Serious crimes are very rare in this town. People just could not believe that this would happen here, so it became a personal obsession.
The chief's first step is to talk with a surviving witness, Crystal's daughter, Sarah Perry.
She woke up from a sound sleep, heard the knife drawer open, heard her mother holler, "No, no, no," numerous times, and she heard a knife being taken out of the drawer. And then it became real silent. She found her mother laying on the floor in a pool of blood.
But there's one crucial question that Sarah Perry can't answer.
She didn't give a description, nor did she recognize the voice of the perpetrator. So we had absolutely nothing to go on at that point. We had basically no leads. So we were really starting from zero.
But with a killer on the loose, Chief Bell has to start somewhere. And the most obvious suspect is Crystal's ex-husband, Tom Perry.
We interrogated Tom for a while, asked him where he had been, what he'd been doing.
But Tom has an alibi.
He had said he'd been home and he'd been drinking with his girlfriend, which she verified.
With his first suspect eliminated, Chief Bell now looks to the forensic evidence for a break in the case.
Well, Chief, as I told you, we got the results back from the autopsy. The first thing that they found of great significance is that Crystal was sexually assaulted.
It shows us that it is a male.
Absolutely. But something of real interest, I think. We got word that there was some foreign blood found. She might have got a crack in at him.
It seems like the killer may have been injured in the attack, leaving his own blood at the scene.
This blood has turned out to be a match with the semen they found from the sexual assault.
As the crime scene speaks to these veteran detectives, a disturbing profile of Crystal's killer emerges.
There was a viciousness involved here. Somebody was intentionally trying to really put some pain and hurt into Crystal. There was in the area of 50 stab wounds.
I know she did not let anybody in that house that she didn't at least know.
It has all the markings of a crime of passion.
And that means Crystal most likely knew her killer. With summer in full swing, terrified residents wonder, is there a murderer living among them? Summer's arrived in Bridgeton, Maine, and all the little campers are back on Moose Pond. But Bridgeton isn't quite the camper's paradise it used to be. With a killer still at large, locals worry their rustic retreat has become a paradise lost.
We've never locked our doors, ever. You know, you're looking around wondering, is your next door neighbor guilty? Who's guilty?
You don't see kids on bicycles walking up and down the streets like you used to.
The rules have changed.
In tiny Bridgeton, no one is resting easily, and everybody is a suspect.
We had quite a few state police officers, plus my officers, going through the neighborhood, what they had seen, had not seen.
I heard that hundreds of people were interviewed, and it sounds crazy, because how could they think that many people out there would want to hurt my sister?
Who would want to hurt sweet Crystal Perry? Certainly not her handsome new beau, Dennis Lorraine.
He seemed like a nice guy, like he really loved her.
But Chief Bell finds Dennis's charms considerably less convincing.
He had an awful temper. He was very jealous, but there's a suspicion that he was there that night and knew something.
And unlike the other men in Crystal's life, there's something Dennis doesn't have.
He did not have an alibi.
The Bridgeton police tracked down Dennis at his home in the nearby town of Casco.
He always was acting suspicious. He agreed to take a polygraph.
Were you the one who killed Crystal Perry? No.
And that went haywire.
Bridgeton police are confident they have their man.
We kept feeling that he knew more about the case than he was telling about.
But when they test Dennis's blood against the evidence collected at the crime scene, the results are staggering.
His DNA did not match.
It's a blow investigators never expected.
We sat down and said, we can't do it on what we've got, what we know. All we know is we've got some circumstantial case here, but we do not have the DNA. We eliminated Dennis as the killer.
With the case still unsolved, the summer comes to a close.
We put up posters all over town trying to make people aware that maybe they could come forward.
Desperate to find Crystal's killer, her family offers a reward for information leading to an arrest.
There were some calls, I think, that came into the police, but the leads that were followed really turned out to be nothing.
And as Chief Bell ends his 30-year career at the Bridgeton PD, his biggest case remains unsolved.
We basically ran out of suspects.
Summer after summer, the mystery leaves a pall over the town and some major unanswered questions.
is so hard to believe that anybody could harm her.
Crystal's loss is never forgotten. And when a new detective comes on board, there are high hopes that he will be the ace in the hole.
When I took over this case, I understood how significant and how important it was to Crystal Perry's family in the town of Bridgeton.
Detective Walter Gribb hopes a fresh set of eyes might uncover some clues that the original team overlooked. Meeting with crime scene expert Herb Layton, Detective Gribb has the killer's blood on his mind.
Remember during autopsy, Bill Harwood noticed these drops. I think early on in the case, they saw this blood and they figured it came from the perpetrator. One of the theories was that he had a bloody nose in a struggle. And what I'm thinking is, as he was attacking her, his hand gets covered in blood and gets slippery, and as he's stabbing her, his hand slips over his knife.
So in a case like that, you're looking for a suspect that will probably have a laceration on his hand.
He's going to have a pretty good scar.
When you're looking at suspects, before you even ask their name, you look at their hand.
Could Crystal's killer carry a scar, not just in his heart, but on his hand? As Gribb continues to scrutinize the case file, he gets the shock of his life.
There was one individual who was interviewed very early in the case, in the first day or two of the case. He was a handyman who worked for Crystal Perry's mother. I read that the detective who did the interview made a note that the person had a cut on their hand.
Not only that, but there were rumors that Mr. Fix-It had his eye on Crystal, but was denied.
And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is it. I don't know how they missed this. This is the guy.
Could Bridgeton's horror story finally be coming to an end? Like the treasures along Antique Row, what's old is new again. For Detective Walter Gribb, a vintage suspect in the Crystal Perry murder may turn into a hot new lead.
The handyman was of particular interest to me because one of the things noted in the interview was that he had a cut on his hand.
And that's not all.
There was an indication that he had expressed some sort of romantic interest in Crystal. The thought is that, well, what if he has an anger problem and he approached Crystal with some romantic interest and she rebuffed him?
According to the profile, handyman Rodney Williams is a perfect fit, right down to the scar on his hand.
In theory, it sounded really good.
But this theory doesn't hold water.
And within 30 seconds of talking with him, I said, there's no way this guy could have done this.
And the results of the DNA test confirm Gribb's hunch.
They worked up the profile, compared it against the evidence in the case, and it was determined there was no match.
Another dead end. But a slice of gossip shared at Main Street Pizza is about to give Detective Gribb his next big break.
It was the night she was at the bar and she was dancing and Joanne just walked up and hit her in the nose.
But I didn't realize she got hit. I just knew she was afraid of her.
Joanne was Crystal's ex-husband's new girlfriend. And one night, the claws came out.
It makes you wonder if she had something to do with it then.
One of the rumors that existed in the town of Bridgeton was that Crystal and Joanne didn't like each other.
Could the bad blood between the two women spell a motive for murder?
Well, as investigators, we knew that she physically could not have been responsible for killing her. Because of the DNA evidence, we knew a male was responsible.
And a footprint analysis of the crime scene confirmed that there was only one attacker.
But it forced us to consider the possibility that Joanne put somebody up to committing this crime.
Detective Gribb takes a long, hard look into Joanne's background.
She tended to hang out with a rougher crowd. She had moved to Bridgeton from out of state. It was difficult to ascertain all of the people she could possibly have had connections with.
Police hit the pavement, but after countless interviews, they come up empty-handed.
As time went on, we felt that it was probably a product of the rumor mill, It just didn't fit.
Sometimes idle gossip is just that. Seasons come and go. Crystal's family worries that her killer will never be caught.
Well, as the years went by, it got more difficult to hold on to the hope that this case would be solved.
But even 12 years after Crystal's death, the case weighs heavily on the mind of Walter Gribb.
It was frustrating for me because I knew how hard we had been working on the case.
But with a mystery killer's DNA permanently on file, the case is never closed.
The DNA evidence was really the most significant evidence in the case, and if you could find a match to that DNA evidence, you're going to find the person who killed Crystal Perry.
And that is exactly right. The killer's DNA is about to make a surprise return visit.
He ran into my office and says, "You're never going to believe this. They just had a CODIS hit on the Crystal Perry case."
It's the break investigators have been waiting for. And for one Bridgeton resident, a 12-year-old secret is about to be revealed. Years after the murder of Crystal Perry, investigators have found a match to the DNA left by her killer.
The hit came back to an individual named Michael Hutchinson. Michael Hutchinson was currently incarcerated at a jail in Cumberland County in Portland on probation violation.
After a recent arrest for assault, Hutchinson had surrendered his DNA to Maine State Police. Little did he know, it was already in the system.
Hutchinson was a resident of Bridgeton, lived not too far away from where Crystal lived, certainly within walking distance.
Hutchinson is a Bridgeton native, but for detectives, the name doesn't sound familiar.
I looked to see if an interview with Michael Hutchinson had ever been done, if he was mentioned anywhere in the case file, and he hadn't been. He was completely unknown to the investigation.
But not for long. Gribb pays Hutchinson a surprise visit in jail to question him about the murder of Crystal Perry.
He told us no. He said, "I don't know her." He said, "No, I've never been to her house."
But the DNA evidence tells a different story.
We knew that the DNA profile for the blood that was found on the back of her leg, the blood that was found on her kitchen floor, and the blood that was found on her kitchen counter, they all matched. And we now knew that they matched his DNA profile.
And despite his denials, Hutchinson is carrying one more critical piece of the puzzle.
It was during that interview that I had an opportunity to look down and see his right hand.
It's the clue Gribb always knew would ID the killer.
He laid his hand open, and I could see the scar running up the palm of his hand.
Hutchinson knows he's been beat.
He started to get quiet, and he just looked at us and said, "I want my attorney."
After 13 years, Crystal Perry's killer has finally been exposed. Detective Gribb immediately shares the good news with an old friend, retired Bridgeton Police Chief Robert Bell.
Well, hey, listen, Chief, are you sitting down?
I always had the feeling this case was going to get solved, that DNA was going to do it.
At the news of Hutchinson's arrest, there is both shock and relief.
Good that they caught the guy.
With all the forensics they had on him, he had to be the one.
Although Hutchinson never confesses to the crime, detectives can surmise what must have happened.
Michael Hutchinson went to Crystal's residence with the hopes of some sort of romance. Maybe Crystal opened the door, she saw Michael, possibly recognized him from around the neighborhood.
But this late-night Lothario had only the most evil intentions.
Once he got through the door, I suspect that the tone changed. I think Crystal rebuffed him. He became enraged, and in that rage, he raped her and stabbed her more than 50 times. He fled the scene and kept this as one of his deepest secrets for the next 12 years.
Now a 26-year-old college graduate, Sarah Perry returns to Maine to witness Michael Hutchinson sentenced to life without parole for her mother's murder.
He was in jail, and he never got out of jail after the match was made.
She was just the best friend to everybody, and she was the best mother out there. I just wish she were here today, because we all still miss her.
It's camp season once again in Bridgeton. Some campers are glad to be back. Some just want their mommies. But they can all finally sleep easy in their cabins, knowing that there is no longer a killer in Camptown. The joys of camp, where a child can really run free, far, far from home, in the summer camp capital of Bridgeton, Maine. But when tragedy strikes Camptown, USA, summers will never be the same again. Summer can't come soon enough for school teacher Dwayne Demerit and his beloved kitty, Max. But even this magical season can turn cold, and a late-night phone call can chill even the hardiest Mainer to the bone.
It was about 1 a.m. My wife and I were sound asleep, and the phone rang. It was Mrs. Austin, my next-door neighbor. She said someone was pounding on her door.
The Demerit's elderly neighbor is too frightened to open her door, so Dwayne races to investigate.
I got my flashlight, and as quick as I could, I ran up my driveway and across the street to Mrs. Austin's house. And when I had gotten there, there was no one there.
The late-night visitor, 12-year-old Sarah Perry, is long gone. She dashes down the street to find another neighbor to help her call 911.
So your mom is in the house right now?
Uh-huh.
And you say that she's bleeding?
All over the place. She wasn't moving.
Okay, all right. What's your mother's name?
Crystal Perry.
Lifelong Bridgeton resident Bernie King catches the call from dispatch and races to the scene. It's a night he won't soon forget.
When I arrived, the house was really quiet. I didn't know what to expect. The doorknob and the door casing didn't look like it had been damaged in any way. It indicated to me that there was not any forced entry. So I proceeded to the side door.
And that's where Officer King finds his first ominous clues.
Coming up, I observed blood drops on the step, on the door casing, and on the glass of the inside door.
But his most shocking discovery is yet to come.
I shone my flashlight inside, and I could see Crystal Perry laying on her back, covered with blood.
Police and paramedics immediately enter the home. They find Crystal in a grave state, with multiple stab wounds.
There appeared to be lacerations on her face and on her chest. Once it was verified that there were no vital signs, we confirmed that it was a homicide.
The unthinkable has become reality. Murder has come to Bridgeton.
This was very shocking for me. I had never been witness to such a horrific crime in my career.
Investigators work through the night, cataloging the huge volume of forensic evidence. The next morning, residents awake to the news of Bridgeton's first murder in 30 years.
You think it always happens in the city, but here we are out in the country, and it happens right in our own backyard.
With a horde of happy campers arriving in a matter of days, owners of nearby Camp Winona have reason to be afraid.
What makes